Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the study along of the World Order of Baha'u'llah. If you are tuning in for the first time, awesome, welcome. Linked below, you will find the mission statement for this series, mission statement video, to give you an overview, as well as the playlist so you can catch up if you want to, and some information about the Baha'i Faith if you're totally new to this topic. You might be lost for a second, but once you get where we're going with this, I think you'll really enjoy it. There's such richness in here. So we're studying the World Order of Baha'u'llah, articulated by Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i Faith, in a series of letters written to the U.S. and Canada in the 30s. And we're reading it because it's interesting, and because if you're a Baha'i, you learn more about your own faith. But also, if you're not a Baha'i, which I am a Baha'i, but I also want to understand better, like, what is the World Order of Baha'u'llah? What is this amazing structure for organizing humanity based on spiritual principles that we have been given? And as we learn about that, since this is a series of letters, we are getting a lot of historical context, because Shoghi Effendi is also referencing things going on in the world at the time that he wrote. And, you know, you could see it as fat that I could trim from this study if we just wanted the structure of the World Order of Baha'u'llah. But I think in every layer of this document, there is wisdom and relevance that still applies. Like, there are things for us to learn from every sentence of this book. Honestly, I think that. So, we are in the middle of a letter called The Goal of a New World Order. And it's really a new world order, right? Like, a new world order. And that is Baha'u'llah's, and it is spiritually founded, and it is from the individual soul through the collective, not a top-down. That's how I see it. And we are in the section called A War-Weary World. This letter was written in 1931 during quote-unquote peacetime between the two world wars. And as we talked about in the last video, Abdu'l-Baha, 10 years before this letter was written, definitely saw how the Treaty of Versailles was not a peace treaty, in spite of what people called it, and that it fomented an environment that was ripe for World War II, right? Which hasn't started yet. We're only in 1931, but anyone who could see, it sounds like, as we read this. Okay. So, anything you want to add, any historical knowledge that you have, please feel free to share. I do have some holes in my research here. So, if you know the answer, please drop in the chat. I would love to learn more about this time period. Neither the force which the framers and guarantors of the peace treaties have mustered, nor the lofty ideals which originally animated the author of the covenant of the League of Nations, I think he's talking about Woodrow Wilson, have proved a sufficient bulwark against the forces of international disruption with which a structure so laboriously contrived had been consistently assailed. So none of the good intentions which originally laid the foundation for this document were able to protect it against the forces of international disruption that assailed it. So just the ego and corruption and greed and avarice of international vested interests. Neither the provisions of the so-called settlement which the victorious powers have sought to impose, nor the machinery of an institution which America's illustrious and far-seeing president, Wilson, had conceived, have proved either in conception or practice adequate instruments to ensure the integrity of the order they had striven to establish. The ills from which the world now suffers, wrote Abdu'l-Baha in January 1920, will multiply. The gloom which envelops it will deepen. The Balkans will remain discontented. And the Balkans, of course, the losing side of World War II. One, Balkans. Its restlessness will increase. The vanquished powers will continue to agitate. They will resort to every measure that may rekindle the flame of war. Wow. Movements, newly born and worldwide in their range, will exert their utmost effort for the advancement of their designs. The movement of the left will acquire great importance. Its influence will spread. So if anyone wants to help explain that to me, I would be really appreciative, because when I read this, 1931, movements, I'm thinking the seeds of what became Nazism. Like, that's my assumption of what he's perhaps referring to, and I could be wrong. But he also says the movement of the left, and I don't think he means that positively. I think he's warning the movement of the left, which, as I understand, like left, far left is, you know, communism and collectivism, and the right is individualism and nationalism. But the Nazis were nationalists, so I'm just confused. So if somebody wants to help me understand or share your understanding of this, it would be greatly appreciated. Economic distress, since those words were written, together with political confusion, financial upheavals, religious restlessness, and racial animosities, seem to have conspired to add immeasurably to the burdens under which an impoverished, war-weary world is groaning. Such has been the cumulative effect of these successive crises following one another with such bewildering rapidity that the very foundations of society are trembling. The world, to whichever continent we turn our gaze, to however remote a region our survey may extend, is everywhere assailed by forces it can neither explain nor control. Europe, hitherto regarded as the cradle of a highly vaunted civilization, as the torch bearer of liberty and the mainspring of the forces of world industry and commerce, stands bewildered and paralyzed at the sight of so tremendous an upheaval. Long-cherished ideals in the political, no less than in the economic sphere of human activity, are being severely tested under the pressure of reactionary forces on one hand, and of an insidious and persistent radicalism on the other. So that's really interesting. Reactionary forces on one hand, and so reactionary on one hand, insidious and persistent radicalism on the other. Yeah, it's really interesting. Like the way I see that, you know, the House recently wrote about like countervailing forces. So there was because the peace was not genuine, there is a reaction from the losers. So the people, the countries who felt unjustly treated, unjustly punished, like had some of their rights and glory taken away. So their foot got stomped on, they had a reaction. And then the quote-unquote winners, unsatisfied with, because there's still that smoldering human hatred, kept pushing the issue. Like, it's never enough, it's never enough, it's never enough, it's never enough. You have to give more, we're going to punish you more. And I definitely think we see that now. Hopefully we don't get to this point, but where there's either a reality or a sense of injustice and rights being lessened or taken away, or, you know, whatever, like, you know, heavy taxes. Like, I mean, you could take this in a lot of different directions. And then on the other side, like, every concession is not enough. Like, you know, it's, I guess I don't want to get into specifics, but I think you know what I mean. If you have any questions, you can write me on my website. But it's like we're never just like satisfied with like, okay, well, you do you and I'll do me and we'll be friends and neighbors. It's like, no, I want more and more from you. And then that causes more and more reaction of like, heck no, not gonna let you change my way of life or whatever. Interesting. Okay. Reaction on the one hand, radicalism on the other. From the heart of Asia, distant rumblings, ominous and insistent, portend the steady onslaught of a creed which by its negation of God, his laws and principles, threatens to disrupt the foundations of human society. What creed could he be talking about? I think he's talking about a creed that starts with a C and starts with a communism. The clamor of a nascent nationalism coupled with a recrudescence of skepticism and unbelief come as added misfortunes to a continent hitherto regarded as the symbol of age-long stability and undisturbed resignation. Very interesting. From darkest Africa, the first stirrings of a conscious and determined revolt against the aims and methods of political and economic imperialism can be increasingly discerned, adding their share to the growing vicissitudes of a troubled age. Not even America, which until recently prided itself on its traditional policy of aloofness and the self-contained character of its economy, the invulnerability of its institutions, and the evidences of its growing prosperity and prestige, has been able to resist the impelling forces that have swept her into the vortex of an economic hurricane that now threatens to impair the basis of her own industrial and economic life. Even faraway Australia, which owing to its remoteness from storm centers of Europe, would have been expected to be immune from the trials and torments of an ailing continent, has been caught in the whirlpool of passion and strife, impotent to extricate herself from their ensnaring influence. More next time on our study along. Thanks so much for joining me. Please remember, comment, like, share, and I wish you your best playing your part and make this world a better place. Till next time.